Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 1619 project discussion by Pasadena Village. This is one of our open events where we invite outsiders, non-members to come and participate. And we have a number of non-members here right now. So that's very good. I want to say one thing before we get started with Brian's presentation. I think something really terrible happened in Tennessee yesterday with what the legislature did. That is really an anti-democratic maneuver, and it shows what people do when they get into power and use it incorrectly, because they are taking away the representation of some 200,000 people by throwing these people out of the legislature for no good reason. And the whole thing is ridiculous. And this kind of stuff is very widespread. And it seems to me that Tennessee and Georgia and Florida and Texas and other states are all competing to see how terrible they can be. And I have no idea who's ahead. They're all so bad. So anyway, I wanted to put that on the record because I just feel very strongly about that. So with that, we'll put that aside and go on to, I hope, better news from Brian. Brian Biery, as many of you know, has presented many times. His presentations are always wonderful, and I'm looking forward to a good one today. So Brian, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Dick. Good morning to everyone. What I wanted to start off with is to say that this presentation is going to be interactive and participatory, and especially with a smaller group, you all will be able to weigh in. So how many of you feel comfortable using chat? And you can just raise your hands. Okay, how many of you feel comfortable participating, answering questions, speaking, coming off mute? Just raise your hands if you do. Okay, most everybody, good. I didn't think there would be shy people in the room, but just to make sure. And so we're going to start right now. And so I'm going to break a lot of rules. I've made this presentation before at Muir High School. Some of you are familiar with Muir. And it's pretty fun. It's humorous because I asked the students to get out their cell phones. So what I'd like you to do right now is grab your cell phone. Most of the time when you have an event like this, they say, put it on mute, turn it off, put it away. But if you have it handy, get it out and actually turn it on because we're going to use it. So the first question is, how many of you have a cell phone with a camera on it? Okay, should be most everybody. My one reason why I asked that question is my uncle, who is 85, he's going to be 85 this year. He has a flip phone, and his flip phone doesn't have a camera function on it. So just to make sure. The second one is, if you have that cell phone handy, do you create photos? Do you make photos with it? How many of you make photos with your cell phone? Okay. So now we're going to use kind of a combination of chat and a combination of voice. And since we have such a small group, we should just come off mute. So what do you do with those photos? Anybody like to tell us? The cell phone is ubiquitous these days. It kind of dominates our lives. What do you do with those photos that you take? Yes, that is Melba.
Oh, I send them to family and friends. Yeah. And sometimes I make photo books with them.
Cool. Dave.
That's just exactly my problem is I don't do much with them. So they just sort of disappear in great numbers as back in time. So it's a big disappointment that I don't have any really good way of using them.
Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about how they're used. And actually, Dick, your opening comment about what's going on in Nashville, we're going to talk a little bit about how we might be able to change the course of discussion or dialogue or a conflict such as that one through photography. So anybody else want to share? Wayne, I see you're off mute. How do you use your photos?
A variety of ways. I also send them to friends and family. Sometimes I post one on Facebook if it's particularly apropos about something that's going on, or if it's especially lovely.
Yeah, so and Wayne, don't leave the podium yet. What stories are you trying to tell?
Well, occasionally it's when I make a trip. If I take a particularly striking photo, I'll post it on Facebook. Other times it's just getting together with family and I want other family to be able to see us. I'll post a picture, or I just share something that unusual that I took a picture of. Occasionally on a hike with the village, we'll come upon something that would be very interesting and I'll take a picture of it and I'll post it. I also do a lot of posting for Find a Grave. That's one of my hobbies is I take pictures of graves that people have requested and post them onto Find a Grave. So I do a lot of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Toby, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know if this is tangential because some of them are not photographs that I've taken, but things that I've kept that have come to me so that I keep them with my photos. And I, as well as family and friends, and I also post photographs of events, of political things, social justice things that come to me that I may not have taken myself, but I use my camera function for them.
Yeah, and that's helpful, and it's amplify. So one of the concepts to be keeping in mind is amplifying the message. So amplifying the message, especially through social media.
Yeah.
And it may not be an image that you made,
Right.
but it's something that you saw that was really important and valuable. So think back in time, and since we are talking about social justice types of issues, think back in time to what is maybe think about a photograph, an image that was really dramatic to you and has stuck with you over the years. And I can think of a couple, but can any of you think of one kind of to Toby's point that really stood out and that circulated? And maybe before social media, you know, it was in magazines, it was in newspapers, it was on NBC or ABC or CBS News. What can anybody give an example? So Gordon Parks photography that's a great example. Let's drill down a little bit more deeply. Any specific image yeah, Toby?
Emmett Till's mom.
Okay, so a photograph of Emmett Till's mother and the pain and sorrow that she suffered during after his killing. What other images stand out to you?
Hi, so this is Rima. I'm a new member attending on behalf of my father, who's interested in this club. So I went to see an amazing exhibition in Palo Alto at Stanford, and they did a retrospective of Gordon Parks' works. And so some of these were unseen lithographs that had never been viewed before. So this was about a year ago. So there was one image in particular that was stunning, and it was actually of a gang member in New York City who was looking out onto the street, and he had this amazing just view about him where you had the color and the light and the amazing kind of quality of the photograph that gave a quality of mysteriousness where you wanted to hear what his story might be. So it was a really provocative image, I thought.
Yeah, and thank you for coming off mute and for sharing that. We want to think about, when we're thinking about communication, and Sharon, just a second, we'll go to you. Okay. When we're thinking about communication in photography, there are three elements to consider. And one is the light, or the lighting, and how it falls on the subject, which is really critical. The second one is the moment. And the moment is, and I think sports is one of the best examples of the moment. You know, you see a photograph of a batter who's about to hit the ball in baseball. And if the ball is just a few inches from the bat, that's when the tension is, right? But if the batter's already hit the ball and the swing is through, then it's not as dramatic. So just be thinking about the moment and which moment is more powerful. And then the third one is composition. And composition can change or vary. Like if you look at the screen right now, you see our composition where most of our heads are right in the middle of the screen. That is fine as composition, but sometimes it could be to one side, it could be up in the corner. It just depends on what the subject is. So keep those three elements in mind when we're thinking about communication through photography, because it sounds like most all of us use our cell phones in some way, shape, or form, or other images to communicate. So Sharon, what's an image that comes to your mind?
Actually, three. The first is the group walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The second is the student who was trying to help at Kent State, the students who were shot. And then the third is the photo. It was taken from the side on the balcony when MLK was shot. And it's the one where someone is pointing toward where they thought the shot came from.
Those are fantastic examples. And anyone else, why do those images stay with us? Why do they resonate with us?
I think for me, the one on the bridge, it was just the solidarity of the people and their dignity as they were walking, and then what happened when the police got involved. The Kent State one, there's a personal connection there because I had a relative who was there when the shootings took place, and so there's a personal connection. And the one with MLK, it's just so shocking to see him down on the ground and trying to stop the blood.
Yeah, and there's a multitude of others. Wayne, did you want to add?
Well, I think it's usually they illustrate a dramatic moment. They kind of tease out of you, you know, what just happened and what is about to happen kind of scenario. And, you know, these kind of things, sometimes the story is so well known that you know what the picture is about without anybody even telling you. But other times, if you don't know what the picture is about, it's still a dramatic moment. Obviously, like the Kent State photograph with the student, you know, crying out over the body of a shot student, that even if you didn't know what happened, you would know it was a very dramatic moment.
Yeah, so these are seminal historical points in our lives and our history, and we can point to just in the last few days of some new ones being created. So did any of you see, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Donald Trump, maybe some of you are, but did any of you see that he was arrested recently? Show of hands, maybe. So there's a photograph that's been circulating everywhere of him in court at the table, and his attorneys are on either side of him. That's going to be a photograph that hangs around for a while, that communicates, oh, a former president has been actually charged, arrested, and will be prosecuted for a particular crime. Another one is, you know, and I don't know where Dick went. All I see is the Pasadena Village. But Dick mentioned the Tennessee scenario. And so Justin Jones, there are several images of him both inside the house at the podium, where he's talking to people about, well, you know, we've had other folks violate decorum and they weren't expelled. And then There are also some pretty impressive photos of him out on the street or during the protest a couple of days ago. So these are images that communicate a very, very decisive moment in time, and they're ones that can help tell a story, and all of us can participate in that, especially because we have cell phones. So we're going to do one little exercise, and then I'll show you some of the images that I've made. And they're all pretty recent. Well, the last 3-4 years. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what their significance is and how they also communicate a message. They share in a larger story, and their intent is try to change hearts and minds about a particular subject. So the last little exercise is, if you have your cell phone handy, again, I'm going to break all the rules. The students at Muir High School love it when I do this, is go ahead and look at the photos that you've taken recently and pick out one. Pick out one that you think, and for Toby, it could be, you know, one that you made or one that you're sharing, but pick out one that, and don't spend a whole lot of time on this. It doesn't have to be the best or the greatest, but pick out one that really stands out to you. And I want you to talk a little bit about it after you find it. So is anybody ready? Do you have one yet?
Okay, I have a silly picture here.
Okay, Dave.
I took a picture of 2 cars that are parked near my house illegally. And what's amusing about them is that one of them is brilliant orange and the other was a brilliant chartreuse. And they not only don't belong there, but these gross colors. What I'm looking at right now.
And did you share that with anybody?
No, I didn't. I'm debating what to do about it quite.
Great, thank you for doing that. And
Okay. See more there.
is it, let's go to Stadjubu. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name.
You should just say STA, STAA.
Great, stop,
Adjunct.
please.
I couldn't figure out how to get on myself unmuted. I chose a picture of my vaccination card, which in the last couple of years, I showed to a whole lot of people.
Yeah, and the story that tells is the pandemic. And we're actually gonna talk about that in a few. That's one of the topics today is, and be thinking about this too, is how do you tell a story that you can't see? And I'll go into more detail later on about that. But Sta, thank you. Melba.
I took a picture of my husband coaxing his mom to eat in the last few days of her life. And it's very telling because she had stopped eating, but for him, she would take a sip or a bite, and I took those pictures. So.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. And that reminds me of, I don't know if any of you, I kind of like some, there are quite a few magazines. The National Geographic is one that I really follow. But years ago, there were magazines called Life and Look. They had stories just like Melba's story. And they were so powerful because they were also communicating a moment that for all of us is, you know, in some ways it's terrifying, in other ways it's a relief, but it's something that we all have to go through. So that's a fantastic example. Thank you, Melba. Any others who want to share what photograph they selected? Toby?
It's, you know, the personal, but very, very universal, I think. My last 2 photographs are my ex at a few moments before he passed, which was Saturday, and my cat a few moments after he peacefully passed, which was also Saturday.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you for sharing that personal and powerful, and I'm sure emotional story about those photos. And those are also terrific examples of capturing the moment, and especially because some moments don't repeat themselves. And that's another reason why, whether it's the MLK photo or the Kent State photo, there's one from Vietnam. I don't know if some of you remember, where a small girl has been hit by napalm.
Yeah.
And so they don't happen again. And if we're able to capture them with a photograph, with a camera, and that's my passion or my specialty, then we're able to tell other people this is what happened. And this is why it's important, and this is why you should pay attention. So those are all concepts we're going to be thinking about as we go through some of the images I've made. Dick, I was wondering, would you mind, you had another, I think it was a screensaver on your Pasadena Village, but before everyone else came on, you had another photo on it. Would you mind telling us what that photo was about?
That was a picture of my wife and my son sitting on a park bench in Riverside Park in New York City, and that was a few years ago. I'm not sure the date. My wife died in December of 2015, and this would have been 6 or 8 years before that time.
Thank you for sharing that. So we see, again, I think it's pretty obvious the power of photographs and photography. And behind Dick right now, there's a photograph of villagers enjoying themselves. And so we're marking unique moments, we're marking transitions, we're marking challenges in our lives, and we're doing it so that we can tell a story. That's the whole point, is that we're telling stories about who we are. So I'm gonna show you a few of the photos. The way it's gonna work is there will be a topic or a theme, and then we'll have a couple questions on them. I'm not gonna go through all of the questions, just because this is not as academic as maybe some of my other presentations, but it will. Oh, and if you all look at Dick's panel right now, you can see the photograph that we were talking about. And you can see, and let's just, thank you, Dick, for showing that. Let's just think about a couple things. So one is lighting. The lighting is wonderful. It's warm. It's beautiful, and it's coming from behind. You see the sunlight. The second one is the moment, and the moment is, one, it's that they're sitting there and that the family's all together. But two is that they're looking at the camera, they're smiling. So he's capturing this moment of joy. And then the third one is the composition. And some people would say that this photograph breaks rules of composition, which it does a little bit by cutting off the feet of his wife. But the really interesting part of the composition of this one is the pathway. Your eye will have a natural tendency to follow that pathway right up toward the sun.
Yeah, it's like it goes to eternity.
Yes, that's a good description, Toby. So you see the three elements of photography and of communication in this composition moment, the moment, and then the lighting. So thank you, Dick, for being willing to share that. So
cutting off the feet is just a sign that I'm not a great photographer.
well, we all work on improvement. So it's a continuous progression. So be thinking about the three elements of communication through photography as I show you these photographs. So why don't we do that? And then I will take off the screen share every once in a while, so that then we can have a little bit of discussion over the next hour or so. Before I do that, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and so I can see most of you. All right. Can everybody see that pretty well?
Yes.
Good. So we've gone through all of these, but what I wanted to talk about in this particular image was just to say, what do you see in the photograph? And just to kind of go directly to the point, what is going on in this image? And actually anybody can just come off mute and describe what they see. What do you see there? I can always pick on people.
Well, we don't know what this issue is, but he's got a strong issue with these two people. And we're in Pasadena for sure.
Right.
Good.
And,
So,
but it's a mystery as to, at this moment, as to what the issue is.
yeah, Toby.
And, well, and there's a Latino or Hispanic name above. There's police. There are two young men of color. I can't exactly read, but I'm projecting a little bit of tension maybe in the shorter guy's face.
So I'll describe to you.
Yeah, and the chances are pretty good they're protesting something.
Well, I can see that they're protesting violence because his T-shirt says "Stop the violence."
Yes.
And even his arm where his watch is very rigid, like he's very, very tense.
Great. These are all terrific observations. So this was, and this is the oldest photograph that I'm going to show you, but this was in the 90s. I was just starting out as a photographer, and so what was going on in Pasadena in the 80s and 90s was an extension of the crack epidemic, and the crack epidemic contributed to a very violent Pasadena in a variety of places. And I'm going to give you some statistics that are not going to make you feel very comfortable, but from about 85 to 90, well, 98-ish, Pasadena was averaging 35 to 45 homicides a year, gang-related homicides a year. These days, it's either 0 or 1 or 2, and our homicide rate is probably, well, it's been like 5 or 6 a year. So when you think about 45 a year, that's almost 1 a week. If we have 52 weeks in a year, this was a very different, dark period of time in Pasadena. And so this was a march to try to stop the violence and to remember the people who had been lost because of the violence. And so All Saints Church was one of the founders, but there was a coalition to end violence that was started out of All Saints Church. And they organized a march, and it went from approximately St. Andrew's Church up to Robinson Park. And literally there were a couple hundred people who marched in this walk, and we all carried signs of someone who had been slain. And so the names that you see on those signs are people who were lost to gang violence. So, you know, when we think about whether it's Kent State or it's MLK, well, we have similar moments here in Pasadena. And so part of the opportunity or the task of a photographer is to try to capture those moments here. So our next sort of theme is street musicians. So the question I wanted to ask all of you is, when you see someone playing music on the street, how do you respond? Would you walk by them? Do you give them money? Do you ignore them? Do you listen? Do you enjoy the music? Anybody want to comment on that?
I'll usually give them some money because they're providing a service that's pleasurable.
Thank you, Wayne.
Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, sometimes they're practicing. Let's just say that. part of photography and part of those seminal images we were talking about, the idea is to try to change people's minds about a stereotypical experience. So sometimes the stereotype is that people who are on the street playing are, maybe they are unhoused, or maybe they are, you know, trying to ask for money in nefarious ways, or for nefarious purposes. I'll restate that. But so I decided, and this is actually an ongoing project because I'm still continuing it, but I decided that I would photograph street musicians because I want to raise up their status in our society. I want them to be better respected. And so I've had conversations with a lot of them. So the first one is Ken. Had any of you go to the Hollywood Bowl once in a while?
Yes.
Yeah, I see some nods. The Hollywood Bowl has been a staple in my family for a long time. My mother is an annual subscriber. And so she actually, she's kind of the reason for this one, but she made friends with Ken years ago. So if you park on it's the east side of Highland, you have to walk through the tunnel. Anybody know where the tunnel is at the Hollywood Bowl? It goes under Highland. And when you come out of the tunnel, just before you walk up the stairs to go up to the entrance, Ken is there, and he's been there for years and years and years. And Ken was a jazz musician in Hollywood, and he played in all the jazz clubs. And he, you know, with age, and then also with just a change of the scene, he found the gigs were harder and harder to find. So he started playing at the Hollywood Bowl, and he's there every night. And he brings his dog, Sandy, who you see there on the left. And so I've had some great conversations with Ken, and my mom has, I don't know, last at least 10 years. And so it's just, and Ken has a house, Ken has a car, Ken is just a musician who's trying to make a little bit of money by playing a variety of beautiful songs as people walk to the Hollywood Bowl. So this is another image of Ken, and so what I want you to be thinking about as you see these photographs, again, it's the moment, the lighting, the composition, and see how they fit into telling the story. And then here's another one. One thing about Ken is that he plays multiple instruments. He's best known for his saxophone work, but he plays a variety of musical instruments. So like I said, I've continued the street musicians activity. And so this was right before the pandemic hit. And so I was, does anybody know where Grand Park is? So Grand Park downtown is right by City Hall. So Bernie Sanders, who I think some of you are familiar with, Dick is familiar with Bernie Sanders. He came and spoke during the campaign, and I was walking away from Bernie's talk because I wanted, they were going to have some more presentations. ACLU had a big event there. And so I was walking up the Grand Park, and I saw this guy playing a banjo, and I said, do you mind if I photograph you? And he said, no, go ahead. And so we started talking, and so his name is Dayman, and his sort of rap is Banjos for Bernie. So what he did all of 2019 and 2020, as long as Bernie was in the race, was he followed him in a Volkswagen van from site to site, and he played, and he raised money for Bernie Sanders. But I think he kept a lot of it too. And he's a fabulous musician. His banjo playing was really extraordinary. And his friend, who you see in this photo, actually did not play the banjo, but was just sort of faking it and trying to support Dayman. So in this photo, you can see that someone has just dropped some money into the guitar case and is walking away with the Bernie t-shirt and heading up to the ACLU's event. So this was the Street Musicians Project. So next one I'm going to talk about is Haiti. Does anybody know where Haiti is? Okay, what do we all know about the connections between the United States and Haiti's history?
Right.
Well, we were a colonial power that did a variety of things, including helped to overthrow their government at one time. And we have assiduously ignored them in a variety of disasters.
And I can't tell who said that, but thank you
That's
for that comment. Anybody else, Wayne?
Well, I seem to vaguely remember that a lot of Haitians migrated to the Americas, either Central or South America. They were kind of exploited for their labor.
Yeah, and does anybody remember about 3 years ago, Haitians attempted to cross our southern border, the Rio Grande River, and how our border patrol treated them?
With the
I see
horses.
some, right, on the horses, exactly. I see some nodding heads. It was a pretty sort of low moment in our, I think, our history of protecting our freedom of speech and freedom of movement, those sorts of things. So when I talk to students about Haiti, they really have no idea where Haiti is. Most of the students, not all the students, and they don't know what our connections between the history. One unique fact is that Haiti was the first country outside of the United States to declare and successfully overthrow a colonial power, which was France. A book that I would highly recommend people reading is called The Black Jacobins, and by C.L.R. James. But it's a story of Toussaint and how he organized people to fight the colonial power and then to free the people of Haiti. So to get to the point, or my connection to Haiti is a friend of mine is a physical therapist, and I'm going to talk about this as you're looking at the photos. So a friend of mine is a physical therapist. She works and lives in San Diego. We all remember the earthquake of 2010, devastating, killed 100,000 people. It was horrible. So the United States has actually 2 hospital ships. So one of the U.S. Navy hospital ships docked in Port-au-Prince Harbor, and it can hold about 1,000 patients. So a young woman by the name of Edeline she was a teacher at the time in 2010, and the school she was working in fell apart, and she was buried under the rubble. She was found by an evacuation crew. She was taken to the ship, and she was then transported to the United States, to UC San Diego, and was nursed back to health there. My friend was called because she has a great relationship with UC San Diego, and was asked if she would perform physical therapy on actually the Edeline and her sister, who was also rescued at that time. And my friend said yes. During the course of the next 2 years, up to 2012 or so, they said, so the question was, how can the United States help Haiti? And so, going back to this whole notion of social justice and political sort of involvement, my friend said, we could send money, but maybe that's not the best use of our energies. And so Edeline said, we need to start a school. So in about 2012, 2013, Institute Edeline was born. And by the way, it still exists and still operates and functions. So for several years, I was on the board of Project Edeline and went down to Haiti. I've been to Haiti 6 times. And so the idea was, how do we build an educational system that actually gives young people opportunities, especially in a land where unemployment is high and infrastructure is poor, and there are many, many other economic, political, social challenges. So what we've been trying to do is help these students and make it to a college and then become more professional, which many of them have. So this particular moment is, again, it was in 2020, right? The pandemic was just coming down on us. We actually went to Haiti right before, it was January, it was before it was declared, everything shut down in March. And what we wanted to do is, many of the students had never had a physical exam. So we used Haitian doctors, and then we brought a few doctors and nurses from the States to augment their work. But the idea was to give the students a full comprehensive physical examination. And for some of them, it had been their first of seeing a doctor, and then also of kind of tracking their health. The good news is that the vast majority of the students were actually in very good health. Only a few had chronic issues, and then through this process of eye exams, a couple of them were given glasses as a result. So this was a very, very productive activity. In addition to that, we've done numerous projects, and I won't go into all of them right now, but we also are, trying to help with not only mind health, but physical health as well. So this is the Institute Edeline project that I've been working on for a while, and is just to try to raise awareness in people in the United States about what life in Haiti is like, and what our relationship is to Haiti. So we'll move on. So we've gone over some of these, how does social media amplify photographs? What are key components? We talked about those. How might you tell a story of a march or a demonstration, and why are photos so powerful? So we've answered pretty much all these. What I'm going to show you right now are some photographs from Pasadena and some other marches, not the one 25 years ago, but these are as a result of the George Floyd's murder. This is, does anybody know where this is? Can anybody tell me where this is?
Grand Park?
Nope.
Well, it says it's Pasadena City Hall. It looks like it's on the steps, the front steps.
Yeah, it's on the front steps. So this is this was the George Floyd vigil that happened, as you can see, on March 30th, 2020. This was probably one of the largest demonstrations I've ever seen in Pasadena. So there were easily over 1,000 people there. And the woman who's speaking, and you can see kind of the pink hoodie, and she's in the black down in kind of a jumpsuit or a jogging suit, her name is Jasmine Richards. She is a representative from Black Lives Matter Pasadena, and she's talking about justice. In this photo, you can see there's a guy named Mike Kinman. He's a pastor at All Saints Church. You can also see some other pastors from Pasadena Foursquare Church, and then Pasadena across the street, Pasadena Baptist. On the far left is a reporter in the red top. He has a show on KPAS and Pasadena Media. So this was a big deal. What we ended up doing, well, I walked around that day, and then subsequent activities, but these are pastors from Pasadena Foursquare Church. What I asked students at Muir High School, because this is all kind of new to them, you all have, many of you observed what happened during the 60s and the 70s, and a lot of the peace marches and the anti-war protests and the racial justice marches, and someone mentioned John Lewis and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But for high school students, this is all kind of history. So so the question I asked them is, why would you say their names? What is the point of saying their names? And some of the students got it right away, and they said it's to remember them. It's to raise up their experience, and then also to recognize what happened to them and to try to end it, to stop it. So this particular image, and then also thinking about police use of force, how that's meted out, who is at the oftentimes at the end of police use of force, and then some of the research that's been conducted on how people are treated depending on their ethnicity. This was, for me, a very powerful moment. And just when we're talking about photography and communicating messages, what I want to just pause here, and are there any reactions to this photo that you want to share?
Powerful.
For me, it's a conversation that goes on constantly in homes of Black Americans with young men in their family. It's like you have to be so careful just because you're Black, and you can be arrested for walking while Black or driving while Black.
Thank you, Melba. And one positive outcome or observation was, I don't know if any of you saw President Biden's State of the Union speech, but he actually mentioned what is known as the talk, which is what Melba is referring to. And I never thought, I mean, if it were President Obama, I could understand it, but I don't think I would have imagined that President Biden would speak about it so clearly in those terms. But he had guests in the audience who represented what the talk is all about. But it's the fact that if you're white in this country, there's a layer of concern or preoccupation that you don't have to worry about, that people of color do have to be concerned about. So it's the preparation of young people so that they aren't targeted by law enforcement.
I have to say that I think Melba kind of understated it. You can be killed for walking while Black or driving while Black, and we're seeing that every day. And that's really, really horrible.
Yes, so just be thinking about, thank you, Dick, that's very helpful. Just be thinking about the power of an image like this to be able to communicate that exact sentiment and that exact experience, because this is why photographs are so important.
Yeah, well, you know what, let me add to that. That is a kid. That's a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. And that picture says how he's going to grow up and what his experience is with police. I mean, he grows up, whenever he sees a police car, he's not thinking this car is here, these people are here to protect me. He's thinking, what do I have to be afraid of? And am I next? So I think this picture is really powerful to me. It talks about what our whole experience is and the difference in experiences that people have and communities have with law enforcement.
And that's exactly right. The differences, the disparity, that's the key point, because if we're really all about being an equitable or we're a fair society, then one, there's no differentiation between groups, but then also we're all treated with respect. So thank you for raising that up. So just to take this moment a little bit further, just the following week, I don't know if any of you tracked all these, but there were a couple of caravans. This one was organized by the NACP, and it started up by First AME Church, which is up on North Raymond, up above Washington. Well, there's Washington Elementary School, and then there's Octavia Butler School. Anyway, again, this is trying to capture a moment and to be able to record it and then share it with other people. The sad aspect of this is that this type of scenario is not, my very first photograph, I was trying to show you that Pasadena does not escape these societal issues. It's not that we're, this shining example on a hill. We have positive attributes, but we also have some negative attributes that are also related, that are very similar to the national trends. So right in this photo to the right of that line of cars is where Anthony McLean was shot and killed by Pasadena police officers just about a year after this photo was made. And that case is still being investigated, and there has not been a conclusion as to the liability or the guilt of the police department or the officer who was involved. And so it's a fascinating juxtaposition of marching for George Floyd, and yet we had one of our own young people who was killed by police violence just in this photograph. So just some other images about that moment, and just trying to portray again the experience and then how people manifested themselves in the moment. So the next one that we're going to talk about is how would you, so we're going to talk a little bit about the, there was a way that I tried to share the pandemic with people, and it was also to try to capture the moment. We're all, why are we on Zoom right now? If there had been no pandemic, we would be sitting at the Pasadena Village office right now, because we wouldn't have developed this technology to the point where we can use it, and it makes our lives much easier in the sense that it's more convenient. We don't all have to drive over to the Pasadena Village office. But my understanding is before the pandemic, all of these activities were in person.
Yeah.
So we can see how our lives have changed because of the pandemic. So anyway, what I was trying to do in this next story is to be able to say the pandemic changed our lives and locked us down and kept us separate, and has long-term emotional, mental health issues. And yet there were moments of value. So this is called the front porch photos. So what I did is I captured friends or just people who I know around Pasadena. This is Alma and Paul, and they live in Altadena off of Lincoln. And they're musicians, as you can see. Paul is, he plays the sitar as well, and Alma teaches music at Norma Coombs Elementary School and some of the other POSD schools. And so, we didn't leave our houses for a long, long time, and yet they were still making music. So what I wanted to do was capture Paul and Alma in situ, so to speak, in their kind of their real world. And yet, I was 20 feet away from them, and, we didn't hug like we normally do. And so this is one of the front porch photos. And one of the reasons why I made these images is to give them a record. So I've sent all of these groups or all these families copies of these photos so they didn't know what their lives were like. So this is Tom and Shannon, and Tom's a member of All Saints Church. And what they ended up doing during the pandemic was to just go on drives. So that's why they have their cars open. They're both electric vehicles, and they just connected with other electric vehicle drivers, and they would drive up the Angeles Forest or Angeles Crest Highway, or they would, drive out. They went to some wacky places, like they'd drive out to Bakersfield and back, and I don't know why they would do that, but they had lots of fun. And they dressed in Hawaiian shirts, and they had adult beverages when they came home. this is Ann, John, Peter, and Paul, and they live over on Breezy near Washington Boulevard, and they decided to remodel during the pandemic and try to do some work on the house. And so this is their garage, which hadn't been worked on yet, but they're taking a break from some of the painting. Peter is now attending Pasadena High School, and Anne is happily retired. So this was Anne, John, Peter, and Paul. And then Sonali, Jim, Neil, and Naveen, this is an interesting building because they added what some people call a granny flat. It's a ADU, or accessory dwelling unit. This blue house here is the house behind their house. And since that time, they've moved Sonali's parents in to that house so that they're living on the same property and they're able to help take care of them. And they should actually join the Pasadena Village because they live just off of Woodbury and Los Robles. But anyway, we can see how the pandemic impacted our lives, and wearing the masks and separate or keeping social distance and all those sorts of things. So that was the front porch photographs. I have two more stories to share with you, and I'll move through them fairly well, somewhat quickly. So if you have any questions at the end, you can ask them. So the power of one. So how many of you think that one person can make a difference? Yay, I see some thumbs up, some hands. Sharon doesn't think so, though. So real quick, so oftentimes we think of, Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Cesar Chavez, as one person who's made a difference. But what this whole project is about people in our community who've made a difference. So I'm going to ask you to come off mute and just share, but can anybody think of someone who's made a difference who's not, world renowned like Muhammad Ali? So who can you think of that's made a difference? Toby.
Well, what this makes me think of is how we could say something and don't know that we made a difference. And maybe the difference isn't humongous, but in how somebody shifts their thinking, and then maybe they do something, or they talk to other people and there's a shift. And it just is astounding to me. I'm a therapist, and how decades later somebody will come back and say, when you said such and such, it really it changed my thinking. And for me, I go, when did I say such and such? I don't remember. And so it's just always, it's been a reminder to me about what we say, how we use language, how you never know. So how important it is to be aware. And not that I am all the time or anything, but I mean, that's one person making a difference in a way that you don't even know that you did. And I would suspect that all of us have at one point or another.
That's so well framed, so well described. Thank you, Toby. Sharon.
Thinking of this very broadly as an impact on the community, I'm thinking of our city librarians. They know members in the community. They share information about people in the community. They get them assistance if they need it. And we don't think about our libraries I mean, I think a lot of us have experience of libraries, is that's where you go to get a book. But they serve much broader purposes and functions in the community. So if I think of one kind of person or subset of people that have a huge impact, I think of our city librarians.
Yeah, and that's a terrific observation. And we can think of groupings of people, for example, librarians or nurses possibly, or therapists possibly, but we can also think about specific individuals. So what I would ask you to do is think about a specific person who, as Toby was saying, made a difference maybe in your life or in your community's life, or a specific librarian. Will, what are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking it's important first to define what you mean by positive, because you can make all kinds of differences, and people do, and I have all sorts of local people I can think of. My grandmother, mother's side is one, the woman who raised Ernie Barnes is another, who have no fame, but have made distinct difference in terms of increasing people's educations and success in life and so on. But I think positive is the important factor here, because according to my value system, the people you're talking about are positive. But if someone thinks positive is dominating the world, then it's a very different set of values gets involved. And the propaganda works rather undiscriminatory, shall we say. Hitler was a great propagandist, as was Gandhi. But positive is a very important thing to define.
Great, thank you, Will, for that observation. And I'll sort of leave it up to you all to define positive on your own terms, but I think there is certainly a consciousness of what is beneficial to the community and what would be a damaging impact. So I think we can all agree on the difference. So Dick, what are you thinking?
I was struck by something Toby said about not knowing what difference we make when we do small things. And I had an experience like that probably 10 or 12 years ago. My wife had a recurrence of the cancer that she'd had for many years, and she had a long surgery there. And I waited hours while in one of the rooms while I was waiting for her to come out of surgery. And then she came out, and they took me down to where she was recovering. And she was still coming out and not really conscious, but the anesthesiologist came over and spoke to us. And this was a Black guy, which was kind of unusual there at the time. But he leaned over close to me while I was leaning over her. And he smiled at me and told me that she was going to be okay. And he had such a warm smile and such a feeling it gave me such a feeling of confidence that I felt better about everything. And I didn't forget his smile and the warmth that it gave me over a number of years. And then in 2015, which was about probably 5 years later, my wife was in the same hospital again. And so I asked if he was around, and they said yes. I asked if they would ask him to come up and visit us in the room, and he did. And I told him what a feeling of warmth he had given me. And I knew that didn't mean anything to him, that he had never thought about that. But his smile was such a wonderful thing that I can see it today. And, so there's something that made a small difference in my life. And he never knew anything about, he never understood anything like that until I told him. I just wanted to make sure that he knew that he had had that kind of impact.
And that, thank you, Dick, for sharing that story. And that's emblematic of people in our lives who potentially change the course of our lives, or just impact us in a way that is powerful, positive, productive. Again, to Will's point, it depends how you define those, but I think we all know what the beneficial side is. And I think we can measure that not only in global terms, but also in unique individual terms. So I'm going to tell you a few stories. I'll share with you a couple of stories. So this is Jervy Turvalon. He lives in Altadena. You know, he's a writer. And so writers, of course, have great impact and influence on us. But Jervy had, you know, there are other things that people do. And so he helped to found a group called Lit for Life. And the whole point of Lit for Life is to try to encourage young people to love reading. And so he and his colleagues go to high schools all over Southern California, and they talk to students about storytelling. And he also is a co-founder of LitFest. I'm going to talk right at the end a little bit more about LitFest and what it's doing. But Jervy has impacted literally, you know, thousands of lives. He's also a professor or an adjunct professor at USC in creative writing. And so this image was made in his backyard in Altadena with his daughter, who now I think is about 6 or 7 years old. This was probably about 4 years ago. This is a group from the Pasadena Sandwich Company. The Pasadena Sandwich Company is over by Best Buy, if you know where that is. And so businesses certainly can make decisions about how they operate in the world. So these 4 brother and sisters, they lost their dad probably 10 years ago from amyloidosis. Amyloidosis is a rare blood disease. In the middle of the 4 of them, there's a photograph of their dad. And what they did is they decided to start a foundation to raise money to find a cure for amyloidosis. And so they dedicated a sandwich to him. It's called the Big Steve, and every sandwich is sold, 100% of the sandwich goes to the foundation. And that's not all that they decided to do. On Thanksgiving every year, for the last 7 or 8 years, they've had a share a meal. And so share a meal is to invite Pasadena Unified School District families to come and have Thanksgiving at the sandwich company. They put up tents in the parking lot. They bring the fire department. They bring you know, a variety of other. They hand out backpacks to the kids and school supplies. So this is something that's extra than what a business would just do. They're giving back to the community. This is Fausto de la Torre. This is actually during a boxing match. At the Villa Park Community Center, the boxing program is a core element of it, and it provides many young people with the opportunity to grow and develop in numerous ways. And he's had several boxers go on to what's known as the Golden Gloves, and so that's and Silver Gloves and Golden Gloves. So those are age group competitions that are national. But Fausto, what he's focused on is just helping young people. And because boxing was his passion, that's how he decided to make a difference. A footnote in this photo, he's still there, but I was giving this presentation at Muir a few weeks ago, and one of the students came up to me afterward and he said, you know, you had Fausto de la Torre in that presentation. I said, yeah. Do you know him? And he said, he's my dad. And I said, well, make sure you tell Fausto that, you know, because he's in, and I'll tell you where to find all this information, but tell him I said hi, and then I'm, you know, supporting him from a distance and thank him for all the work he's done. Hillary Thomas, about 20 years ago, she helped to found Lineage Dance Company, and now it's Lineage Performing Arts Center. It's on Lake Avenue and Mountain. They have numerous extraordinary programs, but one of them is for people with Alzheimer's, is that they have a dance class where and persons with disabilities where they dance, but they're sitting down. So whether they're in a wheelchair or they're just in a seat because they aren't mobile enough, they've been doing those classes for 10 or 15 years for free. So check out Lineage. They're really, really active right now, doing a lot of great work. And this, I kind of dedicate this presentation to Dorothea. She passed from COVID right in the kind of the middle of the pandemic. And one of the reasons is she's a diabetic, and so she was on dialysis. So she was going to City of Hope, 3 times a week. And so she was extremely vulnerable. And so she caught it, and it just devastated her. And but Dorothea had so many activities that she was a part of. I worked with Dorothea for probably 15 years. She lived on Worcester for a while. She lived on Summit for a while, and she did everything from organize walks at Christmas time through the neighborhood. And then she also helped distribute food throughout the neighborhood as well. So last story that I want to tell you is about people who are unhoused, and so it's kind of similar to our stereotypical thoughts about when we see someone on the street, what do you think automatically, what is the kind of the first thought that comes to your mind? And especially because homelessness has become, whether it's Karen Bass or it's Gavin Newsom, it's like the most serious issue in our society. And what I would propose, and I always like talking to people like Dick about subjects like this, is how is it in a state that's so wealthy, how is it in a country that is so affluent that we have 40, 50, 60,000 people living on the street in LA County every single night? And what could we do to change the context? So one thing, this particular project is to show not, I think there are plenty of photographs of Skid Row. We've seen all those. We've seen photographs of, the 110 freeway and tent cities. What I want to show is success. I want to show transformation. So I've followed a group of individuals who at one time were unhoused and now are housed again. They have apartments or homes. One of them, and I'll show you who it is, has even purchased a home. They have jobs. They're contributing members of society. And the question I always ask people is, how much human potential and human capacity are we losing every single day because we have 50,000 people on the street? And how would our society benefit if we were able to figure out a way to house all those folks, provide them with supportive services, and bring them back to who they were intended to be originally? So I'll just give a few stories. This is Lindsay. She was living on Los Robles. She moved up to Seattle now, but she was on and off the street for 3 years. She was able to find support through Union Station Homeless Services. She became an advocate for them, and I actually went to many because we made this presentation several times over the couple of years. And so I went with her, and she talked about what conditions were that caused her to be on the street, and then how she was able to move off the street with support. And this is at Arlington Garden, where she said it was the only place she could go to find peace and quiet, because the problem with being on the street is you never have a moment of peace. Even at night, there's always something that's going on, whether it's vehicles or it's someone poking you and saying, what are you doing here? I'm moving you out. Lindsay's stories were really fascinating. Sean is the one, he now has purchased a home. He works for Union Station Homeless Services. He is the Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement. He was on and off the street for 10 years, more than 10 years. What he's showing us now, this is right next to, if you know where Home Depot is, right behind us where all this trash is, that's where another woman lived. And I'm going to show you her, Dorothy Edwards. And so Sean was a street outreach worker, and he would go to the site to talk to Dorothy and say, why are you, how can we help you? What can we do to change your situation? The horrible part of the scenario is right behind Sean is where she lived. That's the slope of the 210 freeway. Dorothy lived for about 2 years in a tent right on the edge of the 210 freeway. So she felt the vibration of the vehicles every single day, 24 hours a day. And she said, the only way I made it through is I had a dog. She also was able to create kind of a little living room for herself, and she had a little refrigerator because she tapped into electricity at Home Depot. But this is Sean's most important place because he was able to help Dorothy, who was on the street for 20 years, to move it. Now, Dorothy, we'll talk about Dorothy in a minute. So Cynthia Kirby, this is First Baptist Church. Her story is that the only place she could find a little bit of peace and quiet is right by City Hall is First Baptist Church on Marengo. Behind First Baptist, there's a little park. She would go to that park and she would sit, or she would lie down on one of the benches. And then one day she heard people talking and she saw a circle just inside the door. And she checked it out and it was an AA meeting. And she said, can I listen in? Long story short, she connected with people there. They invited her to join the church, and ultimately they found housing for her. And now she's a staff member at First Baptist Church. This is Dorothy. You saw where she lived. Her transition was through Sean, and now she is at Teague Terrace, which is in Eagle Rock. It's on Eagle Rock Boulevard, and she is the enrichment services coordinator. And she showed me her office. I have photographs of her there, and she's very proud of her work. What I want to show is that people can change. People do change. People can be transformed if society provides them with the opportunity to do so. And so these are moments of success of moving people from an unhoused situation into housing and into careers and into jobs that are now, these are people who I feel are the power of one, who are now giving back to community, and who we would have lost their value if we had not taken the time and made the effort to help them to recraft their lives. So just some final thoughts. How did these photographs make you feel? What is the role of effectively communicating a message when fighting for equity and justice? What might you learn? What might you use? What you learned from this presentation and conversation? So I'm gonna, and I'll give a couple more questions. But what was most interesting to you? What have you learned about and change your perspective about our community? And how might you use this information to guide your actions and decisions? And then just one other footnote. These are some of the places where I've posted my images. But then, and these are some thank yous. So Dayman, Ken, Sean, Dorothy, Cynthia, Lindsay, Institute Adeline, Dorothea, of course, Power of One folks, and then Front Porch Photographs. And then I wanted to make a note that the Power of One project continues, and it's moved from, it was a book originally, it then went to a online, so there's a blog, and then now it's in video format on YouTube. So we're going to have a conversation with several of the people who were involved in the Power of One over the years. Tom Costin, Hillary Thomas, Angela Geary is a poet, and Shibli Haddad is a local business owner. And so that'll be May 2nd at the Mountain View Mausoleum. Maybe the Pasadena Village would create a field trip for that.
I would like that.
But the whole idea, and Toby's, I wish I could, I'm glad this was recorded, because what Toby said is exactly what we're attempting to do with the Power of One, is to raise up these stories of individuals who are making a difference in ways that you might not be cognizant of. I think Toby's point was, sometimes these valuable interactions occur and we don't even know that they're happening until later on we go, oh, that was an amazing comment that they made, and Dick's story was emblematic of that as well. So I just want to leave a couple minutes. The questions I have for you, of course, you just saw, but I'd like to know what your thoughts were about this presentation, how it's landed with you, how you might use it, and then how you might use photography in the future to help tell powerful, engaging stories which change the narrative of our society. And I think it was Will who talked about narrative is so important, because if we aren't telling our stories, someone else is telling theirs, and their stories might not be as valuable or beneficial or healthy for our community. So I'm going to take off the screen share now, and let's use the last couple minutes just for some comments and observations.
Well, I'll just say thank you very much, Brian. I really enjoyed it, although I can't see most of the photographs, but the descriptions and the interaction, I think, were very helpful. And the thing that stands out to me with this is there are many times when I think reflect later that, oh, I should have taken a picture of that. And I think one thing that you need to pull out of this presentation is, if you feel like something's going on, pick up your cell phone and take a picture. Pretty much everybody carries a cell phone with them nowadays, and that means you got a camera. And just take the picture, and then you can think about it later.
And for me, Brian, photography sort of hits us in our gut. My daughter is traveling right now, and she sent a picture of this overcrowded school in Africa. And she now wants to raise money to build a dorm for these girls where 5 of them are sleeping in one bed. And those photos that she sent to me of those kids in that school really tugged on my heartstrings and want me to get behind her in that project.
Thank you for sharing that story, Melba. Thoughts by anyone else? How might you use this information? Lucinda?
Yes, I thought that your pictures were very inspirational, especially the people that have been moved off the street and into housing and have become productive people in our society. I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. This one screen, I was also taking pictures, like Dick had mentioned, of screenshots or whatever you call it. The one that you had where your screen showed the different your different websites or different things that we could look at afterwards. If you could put that back up again, it was pretty fast, and I didn't get a chance to take a picture of it to make note of that.
Okay, while I'm doing that, thank you, Lucinda. While I'm doing that, any other thoughts? Maybe Sharon, Toby, Asta?
Yes, I thought that the presentation was, the photographs and the presentation were very thoughtful and much different from what I was expecting, because the title of the session, photography and social justice, I thought was going to be more historical, like you would really show us all the photographs from the history of the civil rights movement or something, and to see that you've included street musicians and homeless folks, and that's very interesting to me. And frankly, much more interesting to me, although, it's beautiful to see pictures of beaches and cathedrals and stuff. I really love this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Will?
Yeah, I'm conscious that I think we as humans are primarily emotional beings more than rational, although we are rational. And things that can strike us on the emotional level, like photographs or things we relate to personally, are extremely important because of the prevalence of things that keep people from doing something. The downing, the miseries, the giant issues and all that. So who am I? What can I do? And having the images, which hit them, many of these images were very emotional and so on, are important to get people to do, because it's not so much that one person can make a difference. It's whether that one person will make the difference. And these are a powerful way to get that to happen.
Thank you. Absolutely right. Well, let's go Sharon and then Toby.
I just am, partially because of what happened in Tennessee, but it's been brewing for a few weeks now, just really, really cognizant of the fact that the building that we have to do in terms of building ourselves back up as community, as nation, has to begin locally. And we have to invest ourselves locally. And that's, I found this so helpful in understanding, you know, one person can make a difference. We can reach out to people and build at a very, very basic level right here locally and from there.
Yeah, and that's really where the building block of social change comes, is from a local activity. It's the national movements are wonderful and they're great, but they manifest themselves, or they take place at a local place, and that's where we can have the greatest impact. So thank you for making that observation, Sharon. Toby?
I'm inspired. I loved, I'm very visual, and I loved seeing the photographs. I loved having discussion about what makes a photograph, and training or retraining my eye to see that way, but also my heart, because I haven't picked up a camera in that way in a long, long time. And you're right. I carry a phone wherever I go. And even though I don't go many places, you know, because I have limited mobility, I see things, you know, right in that little square radius of where I am. I see things. And I look forward to doing this, you know, selfishly as a pleasure, but also, you know, so I really want to thank you and everybody for the reminder that I can do this. It's like, whoa. So thank you. This was
You're welcome.
great.
You're welcome, Toby. Thank you so much. Dick, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things. One is take the picture and worry about the impact of it later, because I've heard professional photographers talk about pictures that they've taken and the impact that they've had. And they said they didn't realize what they had until they looked at it in the lab. Okay, so you don't really know. And I just want to add to that, that the reason we know about George Floyd and the way the whole thing, the episode about George Floyd turned out, because there was a 15-year-old girl there with a cell phone, and she took photographs of the whole thing. If she hadn't done that, we would not have had the same image of George Floyd or of his murder, and that there would have been a very different outcome to that whole situation. One other thing is very interesting. I recently saw Fareed Zakaria interview Cameron. I can't think of his first name. He's a filmmaker, and of the four top grossing films ever made, he made 3 of them. He made he did the Avatar movies, among others. So he's doing the Avatar movies. And Fareed asked him why his movies do so well. And he said, there are really 2 things. One is that he tells human stories that are common to all societies. Okay, like dealing with the kinds of issues that all humans deal with everywhere. And he's very visually oriented, and he tells the story in images. So it doesn't matter what language they're in, people get to the images and they get the story out of the images. So I think that's really an endorsement of what this presentation was about. And I thought that was very interesting. So with that, this presentation is recorded. We will have it up on our website probably within the week. Sometimes these things take us a little longer. But we will have it up within the week. It'll be available then. And I want to thank everyone for coming and look forward to seeing people in the future. And one other thing, Brian, speak to those people in the granny flat and tell them to join the village.
I will.
All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. It's been
Thank you,
great. I
Brian.
really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
All right.
Have a great day.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.